So you're cruising r/gun deals, and what do you see? A CZ P10 for anywhere from $300 to $350. And you might ask yourself, well, if I do spend that money, what will I get? Well, I have about 20,000 rounds through this platform, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to get. To start it all off, let's start with the story. Maybe 5 to 4-ish years ago, I was looking for a new full-size gun because at the time I only had what is now the Glock 45 sized handgun and then a subcompact. So I needed something to kind of fill the role of a full-size handgun, and then I wanted to try something Glock 19 size. So I started looking into what platform I wanted to go with. I ended up going with the CZ P10F to spare you the gap pondering story, because I liked how it shot. It tracks really well under recoil. It's very ergonomic. The controls are great. The only thing I wish they had done is stuck with the Gen 1 Cs, had a mag release that worked on both sides instead of being swappable. I wish they would have stuck with that, but they did not. And then I shot this gun for about 15,000 rounds, and we'll talk about what happened. But to make a long story short, I like this platform so much that I started carrying the P10C, which gave me all the same benefits. Yeah, a little bit more recoil, but in a Glock 19 size. And I've shot this for roughly about 5,000 rounds. There's a reason I stopped at those numbers with these two guns, and we're going to talk about it. But yeah, the title of this video is not an exaggeration. However, the 20K is split between these two firearms, the majority being the P10F with 5,000 rounds on the C. So let's talk about my experience with the F and then the C and what I recommend after that. So the CZ P10F, I ended up buying this back in 2019 and left it mostly stock for 2,500 rounds. In the first 500 rounds, and this is all documented, by the way, I do this for all my handguns. In the first 500 rounds, I had one light primer strike on a batch of duty quality ammo, let's say, that let me restart me evaluating whether this was reliable or not. And then I ran it stock for, as I said, 2,500 rounds, at which point I sent this gun off to Jaegerworks to get milled for an RMR, and then the forward iron sight, Dawson's, because I put Dawson sights on everything. So I left it mostly stock for about 1,000 rounds after the Jaegerworks cut, and then I put the HBI Industries Theta trigger, which I like a lot, mostly for the flat profile and it being metal, stock springs, and then I did the Cajun Gunworks guide rod and recoil spring. I think I ended up going down 2 pounds, and I ran that for, I believe, another 1,000 rounds. Around that time, I sent this to Light Fighter Solutions, I believe it is, for their sprinkle stippling job. In retrospect, the stock texture is actually pretty good. Probably could have left this, but the sprinkles are really good for carry. They don't tear up your stomach, but they still give you a really positive grip, so just make a note of that. And then I think I ran it for another 500 rounds, which got me to about 4,000 or 5,000, if I remember correctly. And then I started to run into issues. So at about 5,000 rounds, what I ran into was this gun would randomly perform double taps, specifically in fast strings of fired, and if there was movement involved, like switching target to target, you would get this, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it would kind of like go off when you would stop on target. And that is concerning. That really scared me. I thought it was me for the longest time, but then I had a buddy shoot the gun and it started happening with them. So we realized it was the actual gun. It wasn't me NDing, which was a relief for me because I really was going through it when that was happening. What actually ended up happening, and this might be hard to put on camera, Again, I'm not an engineer or a gunsmith. This is just me guessing, looking at where the parts line up on the striker. And to backtrack a little bit, I did scour the internet trying to find if anyone was getting this issue, and I found one post on the Brian Unos forums about a guy who ran a early P10F model in competition and had this same problem. And mine is also the early P10F. This is one of the first, if not the first, batches of P10Fs to come in the country. But what it is the, I believe this is the drop safety, the little ledge it grabs to on the striker is almost, this is so hard to get on camera, completely worn down. And this is the stock striker, and you can see it's almost completely worn down. So it'll engage mostly, but enough of a jostle, and then it lets go and the striker goes. So what I started doing was I would replace the striker, and what I did do, and what's in there now, is a Overwatch Precision NP3 striker, and I was able, or in my notes, pretty much after the stock one, and it didn't matter if it was a stock one replacing it or the Overwatch Precision, every 3,000 to 4,000 ish rounds, it would start happening again. So I don't know whether the actual block itself is worn down as bad as the ledge on the striker is, but that's totally a possibility. I would never went in there to check. And that's when I started to get concerned about having to replace this, because in my opinion, 3,000 to 4,000 rounds have to completely replace the striker for a safety concern. To me, you know, it's doable. It's a cheap part, but I didn't want to stick with that. It just bothered me, so I didn't really like it. So yeah, replacing the striker was a temporary fix. And then right around the 10,000 round mark, I had another issue with this gun. I think technically 3 issues. What happened was the HBI trigger, the spring that makes the safety kind of move, you can kind of see it there, that spring broke. So the little safety dingus would just freely float in there. So if you had the gun up, it would fall all the way to the rear. If it was forward, it would fall all the way to the front. So essentially you had a trigger safety that only worked when gravity would allow it, let's say. The other thing was the spring for, this is the takedown lever, but there's like a spring underneath it that pushes up. That either wore out or broke to a certain extent because it was always in the down position. So essentially if you just pulled the trigger with the slide back, it would come off. Anyway, it never came off during firing, but administratively it would, which was, again, not great. And then the other thing was, I think it started around 8,000 rounds and then progressively got worse, but I started getting very strange ejection. And instead of it coming out the slide, it slowly worked its way up to like the 12 o'clock if you were looking down the sights. It started ejecting this way. And when I finally pulled the extractor and replaced it, it was essentially just launching them into the RMR and then back into my forehead. And that was with, you know, a 2-handed grip, fully supported, fresh springs, everything. It was still doing that. So I elected to replace the extractor. And this one, it's not as obvious as the striker. The one thing is these little pockets were completely gummed up with you know, umber powder and whatnot. I cleaned it out, put it in, and it was still ejecting straight over the top. So I believe, let's see if we can get it on camera, the wear on the extractor tooth, I'd call it, was essentially not making it so it wasn't performing as it should. Again, it was still getting the shells out, it was just sending them into my face, which again, annoying. I wouldn't say it made the gun unreliable. I probably could have ran that same extractor for probably another 5,000 rounds before it probably would have stopped. But in general, this being my competition and nightstand gun, when I noticed things start to wear, I would just replace them because in one way or other, I was betting my life on this thing. So those were all the issues. Replace the HBI trigger with a new one. They don't sell just the spring, so I had to get a whole new kit. I said replace the striker every 3,000 to 4,000 rounds. Recoil spring I'd replace every 5,000 rounds. And then I ran it like that, and it was working pretty great for the most part until, let's see if I can find it. I had somewhere in here. Yeah, pretty much until 15 to 10-ish thousand rounds. And it was just, it has a magging, so it might be hard to tell, but it's just very loose. And just given all the other issues, again, the gun still worked, right? It's more of a fit and finish thing. I could just tell this thing was starting to shoot itself apart around the 15K mark, and she was not long for this world. Around that time, I could see my groups, when I would shoot it at like 25 yards on a B8 or something like that, would open up more than previously, even with HSTs or high quality ammo. You know, the barrel's starting to get worn out. It's starting to get, we have all these parts that are having to get replaced earlier than stated by CZ. Just a lot of things where I was like, all right, it's time to move on, which we've talked about in my other videos. On the flip side, the P10C, I did all the same aftermarket parts on this gun. The C did not wear through strikers as fast as the F, and I don't know what that could be. Granted, this only has 5,000 rounds through it, and at about the 4,000 round mark, I was pulling the striker early to kind of keep an eye on it, because I am sticking this thing down my pants on a regular basis. And once I started to see that kind of accelerated wear that the F had, I would just replace it. So this one is only a two strikers in it, and this one has had 3 or 4. So right around the second, the last one that was in here, I was like, I'm probably not gonna practice with this gun as much as I should because of the accelerated wear, and that led me to trying to replace it. So this one was also refinished in black nitride instead of Cerakote, and you can see this has way more holster in and outs than the F, and it's holding up a lot better. But to put things in perspective, would I recommend these? Granted, I mentioned all of the parts where I've had. I bought these when they were full price, so about $500 to $600 each. They're now down to $300 to $350. What would I do? I think they're still a good buy. What I would do is Cajun Gunworks makes a tool steel striker for these guns. I've tried one. It makes the trigger not as good, a little more Glock-like, but for, I think those things are like $20-30, so still sub $400. I would get a P10, put this Cajun Gunworks tool steel striker in there, leave everything else stock, and I'd run it, and I think you have a better handgun than most others in that price point, let's say. The other option is there's rumors, I think it's been talked about on TFB TV and whatnot, that there's going to be a Gen 2 of these coming out, and these are still going to exist as the low-cost option. If the Gen 2 is more than what they've done with the P07 and P09 Nocturne or whatever they want to call it, where it's essentially these slide cuts and optic ready, then it might be worth looking into. But if that's what the Gen 2 ends up being, I would still stick with these. And again, I haven't put extended rounds with the tool steel striker, and that's my bad. I probably should before I put this video out. But that's what I would recommend. Get one of these for $300, $350. Put the Cajun striker in there, and if you want to put the Cajun guide rod and whatnot, feel free. I think it's beneficial. I went down 2 pounds per each. I can't remember what stock is. You'll have to Google that if you end up going that route. Obviously, that all brings the price up. But yeah, I still love these guns. They're ergonomically fantastic, and they're reliable. Even all these parts where I wouldn't even say issues, it's just early parts where it's still worth it. I still spent more on ammo on both these guns than the guns themselves or upgrades were, so I got my money's worth out of them. Just something to note, some parts to keep an eye on. So there you go. Like I said, I like them. Try them out. They're good.